You're listening to the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast, and I'm Lou Temlett. I'm guessing you're having a good day because either you've been on the mats, considering getting on the mats, or maybe you're doing your best to continue showing up to training. I'm so happy you're here listening or watching this episode. Please don't tap out before the end. When you want to find an alternative to freestyle wrestling, start training jiu-jitsu. I'd like to welcome Jon Bell to my podcast. Hi John, how are you?
Good. How are you, Lou?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining me. And it was great to connect on Instagram, which is where I connect with many of my followers and potential guests. So I'm really pleased you're here. And you are Northern Grappling Company, if anyone wants to follow you on Instagram. Tell me a bit about Northern Grappling Company, first off.
So Northern Grappling Company was something that I set up with my friend who I used to be in the military with. It was a couple of years ago, and I wanted to help out a charity that I've worked with in the past. I've volunteered for since I was about 18, 19, here or there throughout my life. They're a disabled youth charity in York, where I'm from, and they've developed a bit over the years. There used to be a few centres over York, and basically parents had somewhere where they could, or someone that they can trust their kids with. I say kids, more kind of teenage age, when they went to work, and they would look after them because there'd be lots of disabilities such as global delay, cystic fibrosis, things like that, so cerebral palsy. So I set up some BJJ events so I could help fund the charity. I say help fund, I don't think I bring that much in from it to help fund them, but help support to an extent.
Yes.
And it's gone from kind of big, smooth comp events where we've had over 400 people and it's ran the whole day over formats to more invitational style. And that's just for logistically and over administration point, it's easy for me to set up something smaller. I don't think I anticipated how hard it was to set up kind of a big competition. And over the 3 years, I think it was just over 3 years ago, we did a big comp at Leeds Beckett University where we had over 300 to 400 people.
Wow.
But yeah, that's something that I want to continue doing for a while. I've tried to do other ideas, like I got rash guards with the Northern Grappling Co company on, and Choose to Youth, the name of the charity, and that helps a little bit. But realistically, it's events. Because it's really nice, as you'll know, when you go to events, it brings people together, and it's not just the making the money, it's the fact that everyone comes, they actually get down to the charity, they see the people running it. They get to talk to the people doing BJJ. It's not just BJJ, actually. I put like you can do judo, you can do freestyle wrestling, or you could do sambo if you wanted to, or catch can. And it's really nice. Like, other than the last one that I rushed and I was a bit annoyed about, they've all been just as much for me because of the great feeling you get from kind of like just like the whole thing, just being around people that want to help out. And so
Amazing. I think anyone that's involved with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or any martial art, we love getting together and having the community feel. And if we can raise money for a charity, I think we're more than willing to do that. Certainly my Celebration Open Mat, I was raising money for her Fight Network Fund, which is helping women fighters to fight more. Not just with kind of products and things, if people need money to pay their electric bill so that they can then have enough money to pay for a competition entry, because none of these things are free, but equally doing something with a group of individuals and helping others to just continue showing up in whatever capacity, even outside of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So it sounds like what you're doing is really heartfelt and from a really good place. Tell me how you started training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, because I know you're a purple belt and you train at York Syndicate.
Yeah, I train in coach at York Syndicate, but I kind of don't. That's where I go the most, and that's where I started coaching. But there's a few places around York, and I don't like to do like kind of the gym mentality where you just stay one place. So there's another place called DNA MMA, another place called Chalk D, and we do have a Gracie Baja here as well. That I've got lots of friends. It's quite a small town, well, to see. It's quite a small city, so you get to know everyone. It's not a
Yeah.
massive combat scene. So yeah, I got into it because when I was in Afghanistan, it was my second tour, so I was about 22, 20, possibly just turned 23.
Yeah.
I was in a compound, a very small compound, just a farmhouse that had been kind of bastardized into a little compound. It was me and about 20 Estonian soldiers, and they made like a makeshift gym out of stones and random things or tent poles as pull-up bars. But I also used to wrestle,
Okay.
more kind of Greco-Roman wrestle, but a bit of freestyle. And I used to
Yeah.
mock it. I used to, again, everyone probably knows wrestling as professional wrestling, like the WWF, now WWE. So I used to like go in with a theme tune that I made up, and I called myself the Wrecking Ball, and then I would get beat up by big Estonian men for the next hour.
Nice.
But it killed time because there's not a lot to do in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And after a while, I actually realised that it was actually a really interesting sport, and so they actually started teaching me.
Oh, wow.
And then when I came back to the UK, so I'm 35 now, so we're looking at 16, 17 years ago,
Mhm.
I tried to keep it up.
Okay.
The annoying thing is that it's quite hard to find freestyle clubs.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing some catch wrestling instead, which is kind of what freestyle was
Okay.
before it turned into freestyle. And then I moved around a lot because I've worked in professional sport, professional football, rugby. I even moved into Europe to work in professional football in Europe.
Wow.
And between all the places that I moved, I I kind of just did what was ever there. So I ended up doing judo for a bit. I ended up um, mainly trying to find freestyle, but
Yeah.
I ended up doing it for a bit and then not doing it for a while. And then I started seeing a lot of BJJ on YouTube. Obviously, everyone knew about it from the UFC.
Yeah.
So I went to a club, and yeah, I think I always would prefer freestyle because it's what I first. It's like when you like the band when you were 14, they're always going to be the best band in
Uh,
the world to you because they're the first thing you heard. It's
yeah.
a bit like that with me in freestyle, but I do love
Okay.
BJJ, and I got into the gi, and I was doing the gi for a bit. Nowadays, I'll be honest with you, Lou, I don't really do gi anymore. I just do no gi, and I still compete in freestyle wrestling, so I kind of go
Okay.
between the two.
I like the reference with, the first, relating it to the first song or the first band that you liked. Actually, you'll always like them, or and the first martial art that you find will be
Mm.
your core, whatever it is. For me, I kind of started out with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as my first martial art, so I think forever it will always be my first martial arts love.
Yeah,
um,
I think BJJ has been great though for the sports that I love. So people
yeah,
start to wrestle to get better at BJJ, or
yeah,
it's bringing people in that coaches that can't make. There's no money in freestyle wrestling in the UK. And there's no money at all. And I would say there's probably not
yeah,
a load of money in judo, but it's helping coaches come from other grappling backgrounds that are possibly
yeah,
dying a bit, and they're kind of being able to coach again, but in the BJJ world, and kind of show
yeah.
the skills that they've had for the past 20 years. So I think the rise of BJJ have really helped all of grappling sports in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see, and I observe when, competitors and teammates have other kind of skills within the martial arts. Certainly the judo, I see a lot. I certainly can't pull off any of the throws yet.
Mm.
There's still time. But certainly the kind of wrestling, the MMA, the kickboxing style things, filtering that into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I think just kind of adds that layer of strength and consistency to keep showing up and kind of refining your game, whether it's competitive or non-competitive. Tell me a little bit about your background and Afghanistan, and kind of, a little bit more the progression into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Yes, so like lots of kids about 16 when they're leaving school. I hadn't gone to school a lot. I didn't really like school. I didn't really have a good family unit in terms of someone making me go to school. So there was no pressure on me really for it to make me go to school. So I didn't go a lot. And then it came a bit, well, all of a sudden you're not in school anymore. And then you have to go into the big bad world, and get a job and work until you're dead. So I had a look around, and I'd always liked fitness. I mean, I smoked heavily and I did all the things that 16-year-olds did, but I was still relatively fit. So I was like, right,
Yeah,
the military. And one of my friends was also joining. I was like, right, that's me. I'm 16. That's what I'll do.
yeah,
And it was a massive eye opener, as you could imagine. And it was amazing for me because I was so kind of shy. I still am quite shy, but I was kind of withdrawn, and it kind of brought me out my shell a bit. It kind of taught me responsibility, kind
yeah,
of really kind of opened. I lost a lot of my innocence and naivety, and it kind of showed me what the world really is or what it can be.
yeah,
Then I left at about 23, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. I was getting older, but you still kind of getting treated like a kid, especially
yeah,
after returning from Afghanistan, where you had a lot of responsibility. You're out in the middle of the nowhere, um, and you had to make big decisions to coming back home, and then all of a sudden you kind of treated like you can't make a decision anymore. And I didn't really
mm,
like it, and I was like, I want to maybe try something else now. So I applied for university and I got in, but you have to do a year. You have to do a year resettlement in the military. So I got as many fitness qualifications as I could, like my personal trainer.
nice.
Um, and when I left, I hit a bit of a luck because I had about 2 months before I started university. Um, and I know I needed to support myself. So I did what loads of people did at that time. Um, like I did like military style boot camps
Yeah,
on a weekend and that kind of thing. It was really big back then. And I know it's died off now, but it was the rage at that time.
yeah,
And I fell into quite a deep depression. I kind of lost a bit of purpose, and I lost a lot of routine, forced routine that I didn't have anymore. Um,
mm,
and then before I left, I was going to a place called St. Avins in Wales to get treated for post-traumatic stress. I would see like a military mental health nurse, and the transition wasn't very good. It was up to me. They gave me printed off all my medical records. They even called me in and said, "Could you sign this piece of paper?" It showed. I was pretty much. It looked like a disclaimer to me to say, if you go and jump off a
wow,
bridge or hang yourself, it's not our responsibility. I mean, I wish I'd have spent more time looking at it, but I remember thinking it was weird at the time.
mm,
And I printed out all my medical forms just on like a piece of paper, and that was up to me to go into my local doctors and give that to them, and then get treatment. And I didn't, obviously, because I was young and I was an idiot, and so I started suffering quite bad and becoming
mm,
quite withdrawn. And that's when I got into things like you could do at home, like calisthenics, and I got really good at calisthenics, like it's kind of like my field is sports medicine now. And then
cool,
now I've got a young family. I'm a lecturer at a big university, a substantial university. I've done an awful lot with the GB wrestling team, so the British Wrestling Association, with sports medicine, talking at the conferences, going down and helping the individual athletes with their periodization and pushing out research paper.
amazing.
Sorry. So I know I mentioned it off camera, but I've got the first publications in UK Freestyle Wrestling, the first in injury when it comes to the UK BJJ. I'm just finishing another one, which again that's kind of how we bonded, isn't it? You saw my
Yes,
link for my new study.
Absolutely. We will
So
come back to that.
I was giving you a segue, Lou.
Like, shush, be quiet. No, it's cool. Thank you, John. Right. We will kind of switch out and come back to that bit.
So, go on.
This is the Jiu-Jitsu Lou podcast with me, Lou Temlett, coming to you from the UK. Go and check out the latest video clips over on ju.jitsu.lu on Instagram. And as you're listening or watching on your favourite podcast platform, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show a rating and a review. Have you ever fancied yourself as a podcast host? I opened up 3 slots last week to be the featured host of the Jiu-Jitsu Lou podcast. They have all now gone, but please feel free to DM me for the next round. Today I'm having a conversation with Jon Bell. Jon, we connected on Instagram because of your research paper. So tell me about your studies and your kind of what's going on for you at the moment in your outside of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu life that might be bringing kind of grappling into your life.
So, I kind of, when you're doing research, it really helps that you have a lot of enthusiasm for the subject, because the amount of time that you have to commit to it, and the amount of detail you have to learn about the sport, physical demands, epidemiology, etiology, it's a lot. So
Yeah.
it was a natural progression for me. In the past, I'd done things on focus a lot on female athletes, especially adolescent females going through puberty and why there were such big dropout rates in sports at certain points through puberty. And I looked very much at the biomechanics of that. And I've kind of moved on from that and started to look at head impact injuries in MMA and used crash test dummies and stuff. And then I was doing a lot with GB wrestling, and I was like, I'm taking quite a lot of data here, just because you do anyway in like a professional atmosphere, because you want to quantify things. You don't really want to, if you make things subjective, everyone knows with mental health, sometimes you think that's something that's really good one day, you say it's really bad. So like everything is number based. So you can do a lot with that data. So you can start comparing that data. You can do statistical analysis. And I had these grand ideas of what I wanted to do. And then I realized there was just no research out there in UK grappling. And what I had to do was just start at the beginning.
Yeah.
And because my background's sports medicine and sports medicine and biomechanics, I would say, I just did a basic epidemiology, and that's pretty much, it's almost like an audit of injuries that happen. And I did it first in freestyle. So I wanted to find out what injuries happened, how they happened. So what specific mechanism, was it a takedown? Was it a reversal? And then a lot of other things as well. And that did really well. I went, because I do a lot for GB wrestling anyway. I was already at these events. I was at the GB Championship. I was at the English Championship. So I took all the data, and it got published. And it was the first publication ever in British wrestling to say that the sport of freestyle wrestling did start in Britain, and we had nothing. And then I went to the GB Wrestling Conference, talked there, and everyone was like, yeah, but what do we do? How do we have, how can we prevent injuries? I'm like, well, you can't to an extent, but you can do things to help lower them, especially when it comes to exercise-based injury prevention. So I did a whole study on injury prevention and got and this is published in the International Journal of Martial Arts. Got all of the grappling research I could from around the world that's ever been published, and just wrote a review. So I said, out of like 8 studies in BJJ, these are the number 1 injuries that happen, blah, blah, blah. And I do that for every grappling sport and propose the best kind of method for an injury prevention program, using frameworks that are already there, that are already well researched. Cool. So that was my second publication in grappling. And this one that you'd have seen, Lou, is now I want to just get all grappling sports in the UK. So Sambo, judo, catch-can wrestling, BJJ, and grappling, MMA grappling, which is a term that I wanted to put in there. I know people just do MMA, but they'll have grappling classes, which
Yeah.
if you were to go, you would probably say that's BJJ, but they wouldn't necessarily say that's BJJ.
Yeah.
But so I put that down as an option. And again, I'm just taking all the information I can, and I'm trying to go a bit further. So
Yeah.
linking it back to the research I did in female athletes, like looking at what point in the menstrual cycle they get their injuries and so
Yeah.
forth. And there's also a few other bits. It's not all. I've not added it just for female athletes. I've kind of looked at what holes in the last ones that I've done where I thought, oh, I wish I'd have asked that, or I wish I got a bit more information like that. So I've kind of like,
Yes.
this is kind of like my kind of like the last one I want to do in the series, just so all my questions are answered, not just for me. It's not, it
Yeah.
is for me because I really want to know, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's trying to get that research out there, and I think
Yeah.
I think this is why I'm trying to get more podcasts and things, because
That's good.
there's a thing that only other academics look at academic papers,
Yeah.
and a lot of times on Instagram, when it comes to people selling strength and conditioning for BJJ and stuff, it's heavily subjective. Then I realized that it's out there, and I'm just like, well, how do I get it out to just like a hobbyist BJJ person
Yeah.
that doesn't really have the time to sit and research stuff in the night?
No,
And
I get it. The research, the questionnaire that I answered, the one we're talking about is the Leeds Beckett University research project.
Yeah, that's where I work.
It's a purple kind of flower logo, LBU. We'll post it on our socials. The questions ask what type of martial art you do, what type of injuries. Now, I noticed all of my injuries kind of occurred between in my kind of luteal phase, which is kind of day 15 to kind of day 25-ish. And it feels like that's when my joints, my tendons, my muscles feel not quite as strong as they might have done at the beginning. So I'm really interested to see some of the research and the data that comes out of your research project. But if you haven't filled out this questionnaire, we will share the links in the show notes. Please, if you train Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or any other martial art that Jon has mentioned, go and fill out the data, especially if you're female, because having that balance of the male and female data is really important for any research project. So tell me a bit about, I know you've got a lot of information around history of freestyle wrestling and the origins. We were talking a bit before we started recording about the origins of some of that freestyle wrestling. Indulge me now with the catch can thing.
Thankfully, not many people let me talk about this because I get a bit too enthusiastic. So through doing the research, if you ever read a research paper, then the first few lines normally introduces you to the sport, just so you get a background. Before I start fancy biomechanical terms and all that, it's a nice intro to what sport is this research about. And from that, and obviously my own interests in going down rabbit holes at 2 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep, I've done a lot of research on how grappling sports have developed in the UK. So catch can wrestling it's a British sport, and it doesn't really get the credit that it should do with how much it's contributed to modern day grappling and BJJ.
Yeah.
So basically, wrestling in the UK goes back to the Celtic times. There's lots of documentation from kind of the Roman period talking about Celtic traditions and wrestling. And then if you go into medieval times, it's mentioned in medieval literature about Cornish wrestling, Northumbria wrestling. And then in about the 17 to 1800s, more so the 1800s with catch can wrestling, Lancashire wrestling kind of developed into something called catch can. So catch what you can, meaning can you catch a leg? Can you catch any peripheral limb, basically? Can you crank the neck? And it developed into this sport that actually got really big in America too, and it worked. It got big because people used to do it to settle bets.
Ah,
They used to do it as carnivals, so they would have like one wrestler there, and they'd be like,
yeah.
"Can you beat him? If you beat him, you get it." And it moved over to America and kind of like the circus carnival kind of scene, and it got really big. And we were having world championships in catch can wrestling back in the late 1800s, like early 1900s. And it got into the Olympics. So it was in the Olympics. I think it was
Wow.
1906. So it was the second Olympic, not the first one. And it was in the Olympics for 20 years. And then it was seen as barbaric because you can crank people's necks and you could, well, it was just quite a barbaric sport.
So if you'd done your research paper back then, you would have had a lot more severe injuries, John.
Well, no, I included catch can in this. I can see the real people still practice it. So I've not got many catch can wrestlers, obviously to BJJ, and that obviously shows kind of what the population of Great Britain is currently training. But they merged the rules of catch can to make it less brutal, and that's
Yeah.
what became freestyle wrestling. So freestyle wrestling, what you see in the Olympics now,
Hmm.
came from catch can. And obviously, then America kind of made their own style, which is called folklore wrestling. So all of kind of like a lot of the modern day grappling has a long history in Great Britain, which I didn't even know about till maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And a lot of kind of modern day BJJ, all these grappling, so it's not just catch can, like things like sambo and judo have all merged into to the point that now people sometimes don't even call BJJ, they call it submission grappling,
Oh,
because it is kind
yes.
of just, nowadays it's just like a big amalgamation of every grappling sport that's ever existed. If it works, it
Yeah.
works. So it doesn't matter what rule set it is, you're going to use it. So like Greco-Roman comes from France, which is, when you actually start looking into like the origins of some of these things, you're just like, it's so weird how these things came about, and like arts that aren't around anymore but are very
Yeah.
similar to
It's
normal. Yeah,
it's very, very cool. If you want to know more, please tap John up for some more
just
kind
send
of
me a message.
wrestling history, please. It's incredibly interesting. I'm not just saying that; I am quite interested in the history, and I'm just trying to store all of those facts. But obviously, if you're competing, then do follow the rule set of whichever competition. And I know, if it's just a little caveat there, and stay safe. I want to talk and ask you some more questions about the types of injuries you're seeing more of in your research.
So, knee injuries are number one. So a lot of the research that I'm getting in from this latest study, even it's been out for a while, and I've just been looking at the data as it comes in, and it
Yeah,
probably won't be open too much longer. So this is probably the last few weeks that I'm going to keep the data coming in, and then I'll
yeah,
analyze it. But I can talk about that even though that's not published, because I'm not mentioning anybody's name or any
yeah.
specific details. I can still talk about what I've gotten from that
Hmm.
study, and overwhelmingly, it's knee injuries.
Okay.
And that is what's in freestyle wrestling as well. So the number one injury in BJJ is also the number one injury in freestyle. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, is there a pattern between all these grappling sports? So could
Yeah,
you treat injury prevention holistically rather than just
yeah,
saying injury prevention for BJJ, injury
yeah,
prevention for judo? And it looks like you might be able to. So knee injuries are big. Where
yeah,
BJJ starts to differ a bit, and this will probably come from the gi, and it's actually, you see it a lot in judo. So you get a lot of hand and finger injuries
yeah,
where you don't really get those in no gi and
yeah,
freestyle wrestling as much, because
yeah,
obviously you grip fighting, which you don't do in no
yeah,
gi. There's quite a lot of short. So the third injury in BJJ, but the second injury in wrestling is the shoulder and the neck.
yeah,
And I've also found out how they happen, because people, that's one of the questions, isn't it? Um, so I ask, were you taken down, or was someone
yeah,
taking you down? Was someone putting a submission on you, or were you putting it on them? And there's other positions as well. So some are more specific to like the sport. So I've got one where you escaping a pin, which is obviously more wrestling. But
yeah.
I've tried to cut something so it fits every single grappling art, and quite a lot of people get injured from escaping as well, so escaping a position. So when they're kind of struggling to get out of something, the two top one, because they're very similar, is being taken down or a submission. And it's really interesting now because if you add those together and added the percentage together, then that is the number one that massively overtakes. A lot of it comes from contact with the mat, with the knee.
Yeah.
And with the knee, I kind of put forward a bit of a theory, or one reason why it might be happening is because there's a lot of torque within the knee. So with a lot of injuries are coming from people taking people down, and there's at some point there's been some form of torque on that knee, and that looks like it's the most overwhelming one. Then if you do look at submissions, from my point of view, there's not a lot I can do from that. That's a coaching thing. So if you're going to torque somebody's peripheral joint, so if you're going to torque a shoulder out, put it into a range of motion that it can't go, then it's going to get injured. But from my point of view, there's not a lot I can do. That I can't. Like, yes, you can make your shoulder more mobile, you can make the muscles stronger, and to an extent that will help. But people in these positions can put it as far back as they possibly want. Till the person will have to tap, especially people being stubborn, and no amount of injury prevention in the world.
I'm not sure who would be stubborn. I'm not tapping out before the end.
So that's not from an injury point of view, and stopping that. That's an athlete's responsibility or a coach's responsibility to explain the importance of not being stubborn, Lou, or giving your opponent time to realize the position that they're in and the ultimate doom, the impending doom that they're going to do.
Okay,
so it's interesting.
It's very interesting. If you do want any more information from Jon about all of these things, when will your research paper be out and available for people to kind of have a look at?
Hopefully not too long. I've already kind of started writing up the first part. It's just I'm doing a few different research things at the moment, and obviously I do lectures. I do have my responsibilities are there. I'm doing a lot of. I'm working for the Muay Thai Associate, the GB Muay Thai Association, and doing a lot of stuff with them with adolescent athletes and head injury. And I'm using, this is interesting, mouth guards with accelerometers in them to measure head impact velocity in bare knuckle boxing and glove boxing. So realistically,
we will share the
links. It could be a year, it could be 6 months.
That's fine. I think it's going to be very interesting data. Now, I would really appreciate you sharing some tips on how to stay safe and injury-free. Maybe one or two tips that might help anyone that currently trains Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or might be thinking about training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and wanting to stay safe.
It's to look at it quite holistically, isn't it? You could sit down and talk about this for hours, because you could then look at sleep, nutrition, and they're not really my areas anyway, nutrition or sleep. I'm not good at either of them. But when it comes to injury prevention in terms of, I guess what you would look at maybe S&C. It's not necessarily S&C, because you can just look at it as mobility and general exercise.
That's strength and conditioning. For me, strength and conditioning is carrying the shopping up 3 flights of stairs. Anyway.
I mean, that's still pretty good though. That's like a farmer's carry, isn't it? But it's making sure that you're keeping your joints and your body in a good condition. So I won't bore too much on about this, but just a good example, I think, of showing you how that work. If you were to fall from a takedown, to which we know is one of the biggest cause of injury, what your body has to do is you have to attenuate force. So people say you have to absorb force. You don't. I don't know how that terminology came about. Newton's laws suggest that you can't, if something's in motion, for it to stop, and the opposing force of the same force has to go against it. So what you do is you match that force the best you can. So you contract, don't you? You contract your muscles. So how good you are at producing force and how much force your body can produce is always going to help you from controlling a jump, if you are jumping, or if you're controlling a fall, if it's on your side or even on your back. It's all about force attenuations and matching that force. And that's probably a really good example of why you need to be good at producing force in lots of different ranges. And the easiest, simplest way to do that is resisted training. It doesn't have to be, I don't do a lot of weightlifting. That would probably be the simplest thing that people would do. But it could be body weight exercise. It could be, as long as you're, I think the worst thing people do for BJJ is think their cardio is bad. So they just absolutely blast lots of cardio stuff, or they want to do 1 million press-ups and run into some kind of a bit like CrossFit style.
Yeah.
And that's not going to develop the force that you need. So I would say, to answer your question, can a structured resisted training program that goes through things like increasing mobility, to be smart about it. And if you're not too sure what you're doing, ask a friend who does. If you've got the income, then obviously get a personal trainer or someone who can, and just sit down, make a plan, see how you can fit it into your program that you've got now, along with your BJJ. And that's my advice.
Amazing. Jon, how can people follow you on Instagram, follow your journey, and DM you to find out more history in wrestling and BJJ?
Well, if you want, you can have advice on anything. If you're a female athlete and you want advice on some of the issues we put forward, and if I can help you, I will. I'm very good at saying if I can't, if I don't think I'm the best person for it. But SNC advice as well, it would all be through my Instagram page. I got rid of most of my socials a while ago for just mental health. Just, it can be quite toxic, can't it? But I kept my Instagram as a point of contact. Well, I didn't. I got rid of it, and then I needed it for the charity to promote these events. So my Northern Grappling Co Instagram is there, and people use it to message me about all sorts, and I'll answer if I can. And I'm not. I generally don't ignore messages, but I sometimes just maybe message this nutritionist instead, because I have no idea what I'm doing in that area. But if you need to find me in a professional capacity, some more kind of, you want to maybe do work on some research papers or something like that, then it would be my Leeds Beckett account. And if you just type in Jon Bell, Leeds Beckett, then my profile will come up.
Fabulous. Jon, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom, research, insights. I think it's been an incredibly interesting episode, and I would love to have you back on when you've published when the research paper has been published, to talk about some of the findings.
Thanks, Lou. I've really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate kind of an outlet to kind of promote the research. I make no financial gain from it. I just generally have spent so much time doing it that I want people to actually look at it and use it and help people with it. So things like this really help me get it out there, so I appreciate it.
You are very welcome. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for telling your friends about this show. And as soon as this episode ends, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show a rating and a review. Thanks again for listening. Catch you on the next episode of the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast.